Sarah Martinez had always been different from other girls in her small Texas town. While her classmates spent weekends at the mall, she was climbing trees, racing bikes, and challenging the neighborhood boys to arm wrestling contests. Her father, a retired Marine, watched with quiet pride as his daughter displayed the same fierce determination that had carried him through 2 tours overseas. The summer she turned 17, Sarah discovered something that would change her life forever. During a family barbecue, her uncle mentioned a documentary he had watched about Navy SEALs. The elite warriors fascinated Sarah, not because of their weapons or tactics, but because of their mental toughness. She spent the entire night researching everything she could find about SEAL training, their physical requirements, and their legendary endurance tests. Sarah learned that becoming a Navy SEAL required passing one of the most grueling training programs in the world. The statistics were staggering: only about 25% of candidates successfully completed the training. The physical demands included swimming vast distances in freezing water, carrying heavy boats over their heads for miles, and enduring sleep deprivation that pushed the human mind to its breaking point. What struck Sarah most was not the difficulty of the training, but the fact that women were not allowed to attempt it. For decades, this elite brotherhood had remained exclusively male, with military leadership citing physical differences and unit cohesion as primary reasons. Sarah felt a burning frustration that surprised her with its intensity. She had never been one to accept limitations simply because someone else believed they existed. Throughout her senior year of high school, Sarah threw herself into physical training with an obsession that worried her parents. She woke up at 4 a.m. to run 10 miles before school. She spent lunch periods in the gym, pushing her body through increasingly challenging workouts. Her grades remained excellent, but her social life disappeared entirely. Friends stopped inviting her to parties when they realized she would decline in favor of training. Sarah's mother, Elena, tried repeatedly to understand her daughter's sudden fixation on military fitness. During one particularly heated dinner conversation, she asked Sarah why she was torturing herself for something she could never achieve. Sarah's response silenced the entire table. She explained that she was not training to become a Navy SEAL, she was training to prove that the physical standards were not impossible for a determined woman to meet. The idea that would eventually shake the military establishment began as a simple question in Sarah's mind: what if someone could demonstrate that women could meet the same physical standards as men? Not through lowered requirements or special accommodations, but by meeting the exact same benchmarks that male candidates faced. Sarah understood that policy changes happen slowly in the military, but she also knew that undeniable proof could accelerate those changes. Sarah's research revealed that civilian fitness enthusiasts occasionally attempted SEAL-style workouts and challenges, though never with the intention of making a serious statement about military policy. She discovered online communities where former SEALs shared training tips and workout routines. These men, many of whom had served with distinction, were surprisingly supportive when Sarah began participating in their discussions. One former SEAL, retired Chief Petty Officer Marcus Thompson, took particular interest in Sarah's goals. Through their online correspondence, Marcus learned that Sarah was not seeking attention or trying to make a political statement. Her motivation was purely personal: she wanted to test the limits of human determination against established barriers. Marcus had seen many young men fail SEAL training despite superior physical gifts, while others with less impressive physiques succeeded through mental toughness alone. Marcus eventually agreed to meet Sarah in person during one of his visits to Texas. He was immediately struck by her serious demeanor and genuine respect for the SEAL community. Unlike many civilians who romanticized special operations, Sarah understood that the training was designed to identify individuals capable of performing under extreme stress, not to showcase physical prowess. She asked intelligent questions about mental preparation techniques and stress inoculation methods. During their conversation, Marcus mentioned that several SEAL training records were matters of public record, having been established during qualification tests that were occasionally witnessed by civilian observers. He explained that the most famous of these was an endurance challenge that combined swimming, running, and calisthenics in a specific sequence that tested both physical capability and mental resilience under fatigue. Sarah asked Marcus if he thought she had any chance of approaching these benchmarks. Marcus studied her for a long moment before answering honestly. He told her that physical capability was only part of the equation, the mental component was what separated successful candidates from the majority who failed. He had seen college athletes and professional fighters quit during training, while smaller individuals with unbreakable spirits pushed through seemingly impossible challenges. Marcus made Sarah an offer that would change her trajectory entirely. He explained that he occasionally conducted private training camps for civilians interested in experiencing military-style fitness challenges. These camps were not official military programs, but they used the same training principles and standards that Marcus had learned during his years as a SEAL instructor. He invited Sarah to attend his next camp, warning her that it would be the most difficult thing she had ever attempted. The camp was scheduled for the following summer, giving Sarah nearly 8 months to prepare. Marcus provided her with a detailed training program that gradually increased in intensity, designed to prepare her body for challenges that would have been unthinkable when she first began her fitness journey. The program included cold water swimming, weighted runs, and endurance exercises that pushed participants well beyond normal comfort zones. Sarah's dedication intensified beyond what her family thought possible. She transformed her daily routine into a military-style regimen that left no room for leisure activities. Her bedroom walls became covered with training schedules, nutritional plans, and motivational quotes from military leaders. She tracked every workout, meal, and recovery session with scientific precision. The physical changes were obvious to everyone around her. Sarah's body became lean and powerful, with the kind of functional strength that came from months of purposeful training. But the mental changes were even more profound. Sarah developed a quiet confidence that her friends and teachers noticed immediately. She approached challenges with a calm determination that seemed almost supernatural to those who remembered the uncertain teenager she had been just months earlier. As the date of Marcus's training camp approached, Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness that reminded her of the anticipation before a major exam. She had spent months preparing for this opportunity, but she understood that no amount of preparation could fully predict how she would respond to the mental pressure that Marcus promised would accompany the physical challenges. Marcus Thompson's training facility was nothing like Sarah had imagined. Located on a remote section of California coastline, the compound consisted of basic buildings, obstacle courses, and direct access to the Pacific Ocean. No fancy equipment or motivational posters decorated the walls, just functional spaces designed for one purpose: testing human limits. Sarah arrived on a Sunday evening to find 11 other participants already settling into the sparse dormitory accommodations. The group included former military personnel seeking to recapture their peak fitness, law enforcement officers preparing for specialized units, and civilians like herself who wanted to experience elite-level training. What surprised Sarah was the immediate sense of camaraderie among the participants, despite their diverse backgrounds. The only other woman in the group was Jennifer Walsh, a former Marine who had served in Iraq and was now preparing for a career in federal law enforcement. Jennifer approached Sarah on their first night with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. She had heard about Sarah's goals through mutual connections in the fitness community and wanted to understand what drove a civilian to attempt something that many trained military personnel found impossible. Jennifer's initial assessment was blunt but not unkind. She explained that military training created mental toughness through shared suffering and mutual dependence, concepts that could not be fully replicated in civilian programs. Jennifer had witnessed the transformation that occurred when individuals pushed beyond their perceived limits while surrounded by others facing the same challenges. She warned Sarah that the experience would reveal things about herself that might be uncomfortable to discover. The first day of training began at 4 a.m. with what Marcus called a baseline assessment. The participants faced a series of physical challenges designed to establish their current capabilities before the real training began. Sarah performed well in most events, but she noticed that several participants, including former military personnel, struggled with exercises that she had been practicing for months. Marcus observed each participant carefully, taking notes that he did not share with the group. Sarah later learned that he was not simply measuring physical performance, but watching for signs of mental resilience, teamwork, and the ability to maintain composure under stress. These qualities, Marcus explained, were far more important than raw athletic ability when it came to successfully completing elite military training. The second day introduced Sarah to her first taste of the mental pressure that would define the rest of the program. Marcus announced that the group would attempt a modified version of a Navy SEAL qualification challenge that combined swimming, running, and calisthenics in a specific sequence. The catch was that participants would be eliminated from the program if they failed to meet minimum standards on any component. Sarah felt her heart rate increase as Marcus explained the requirements. Participants had to complete a 2-mile ocean swim in water temperatures below 60 degrees, followed immediately by a 4-mile run carrying a 40-pound pack, and concluding with a series of calisthenics exercises performed to failure. The entire sequence had to be completed within a specific time limit that Marcus would not reveal until the challenge began. The elimination threat transformed the group dynamic instantly. Participants who had been supportive and encouraging suddenly became focused entirely on their own performance. Sarah watched as several individuals began to display signs of anxiety that she recognized from her own training experiences. The difference was that this time, failure would have immediate consequences rather than simply requiring additional preparation. Jennifer approached Sarah before the challenge began with advice that proved invaluable. She explained that the key to surviving elimination events was not to focus on the overall requirements, but to break each component into smaller, manageable segments. Jennifer shared techniques she had learned during Marine training for maintaining mental focus when physical exhaustion made clear thinking nearly impossible. The ocean swim began in conditions that tested every participant's resolve. The water temperature was 58 degrees, cold enough to cause immediate shock to anyone who had not properly prepared. Sarah had spent months training in cold water, but the combination of temperature, waves, and the pressure of being evaluated created a unique challenge that no amount of preparation could fully simulate. Halfway through the swim, Sarah realized that 2 participants were already struggling significantly. One man, a former Army Ranger who had appeared to be among the strongest in the group, was falling behind as the cold water sapped his energy reserves. Sarah faced a choice that would define her approach to the remaining challenges. She could focus entirely on her own performance, or she could try to help struggling teammates. Sarah chose to swim alongside the struggling participant, offering encouragement and helping him maintain proper form as hypothermia began to affect his coordination. This decision cost her valuable time and energy, but it also revealed something important about her character that Marcus noted carefully. When they reached the beach, the ranger thanked Sarah quietly before moving to the next challenge. The running portion proved to be Sarah's strongest event. Months of weighted runs had prepared her body for the specific demands of carrying a heavy pack over varied terrain. She found herself moving ahead of several participants who had seemed far more capable during earlier assessments. The key was pacing, maintaining a sustainable rhythm that would leave energy reserves for the final calisthenics component. During the run, Sarah experienced something that she had read about but never fully understood. Her mind seemed to separate from her body, observing her physical performance with a detached clarity that allowed her to push through discomfort that would normally have forced her to slow down. This mental state, which Marcus later explained was common among elite athletes and military personnel, became one of Sarah's most valuable tools for the remaining challenges. The calisthenics portion exposed weaknesses in several participants who had excelled at swimming and running. The exercises required participants to perform push-ups, sit-ups, and pull-ups to failure while already exhausted from the previous events. Sarah's months of training paid dividends as she maintained proper form even as fatigue made every movement increasingly difficult. When Marcus finally called time, 7 participants had successfully completed the challenge within the required standards. 4 had been eliminated, including 2 former military personnel whose fitness levels had declined since their active duty service. Sarah had not only survived the elimination, but had posted times that placed her in the top half of successful participants. That evening, Marcus addressed the remaining group with a seriousness that had been absent during the earlier, more casual training sessions. He explained that they had just experienced a taste of the mental pressure that defined actual military selection programs. The physical requirements were challenging but manageable for properly prepared individuals. The real test was maintaining performance standards when failure carried meaningful consequences. Marcus shared stories from his years as a SEAL instructor about candidates who had possessed impressive physical gifts but had failed when the mental pressure intensified. He also described individuals who had seemed unlikely to succeed but had demonstrated mental resilience that carried them through challenges that defeated stronger competitors. The common factor among successful candidates was not physical superiority, but an unshakable commitment to completing the mission regardless of personal discomfort. Jennifer approached Sarah after dinner with a new level of respect in her voice. She admitted that she had initially doubted whether a civilian could develop the mental toughness required for elite military challenges. Sarah's performance during the elimination event, particularly her decision to help a struggling teammate, had demonstrated qualities that Jennifer recognized from her own military experience. The conversation with Jennifer helped Sarah understand something important about her own motivations. She had begun this journey focused on proving that women could meet the same physical standards as men, but the experience was teaching her that the real barriers were mental rather than physical. The upcoming challenges would test whether she could maintain her performance standards when the pressure increased even further. The third week of training introduced challenges that pushed beyond physical endurance into psychological territory that Sarah had never experienced. Marcus announced that the remaining participants would face what he called stress inoculation exercises, scenarios designed to simulate the mental pressure that Navy SEALs encountered during actual operations. These exercises would test their ability to make clear decisions and maintain performance standards while experiencing extreme stress. The first stress inoculation exercise began at midnight when Marcus woke the group with simulated explosions and shouting instructors. Participants had 30 seconds to dress, gather their equipment, and report for a mission briefing that would determine their activities for the next 18 hours. Sarah fumbled in the darkness, her heart racing as she tried to remember where she had placed her gear while loud voices demanded immediate compliance. The exercise scenario involved a simulated rescue mission where participants had to navigate treacherous terrain, locate mock casualties, and extract them to safety while facing time pressure and equipment failures. Marcus and his assistant instructors played the roles of enemy forces, using harassment techniques designed to break concentration and force poor decisions under pressure. Sarah found herself appointed as team leader for one segment of the exercise, a responsibility that terrified and energized her simultaneously. She had to coordinate the movement of 6 exhausted participants across rocky coastline while instructors shouted contradictory orders and created artificial emergencies that demanded immediate responses. The weight of decision-making while exhausted proved more challenging than any physical requirement she had faced. During one critical moment, Sarah had to choose between following the planned route and taking a dangerous shortcut that might save valuable time. The mock casualties were portrayed as critically injured, adding emotional pressure to the tactical considerations. Sarah made the decision to stick with the safer route, a choice that cost precious minutes but avoided potential team injuries that would have ended the exercise in failure. Marcus later explained that leadership decisions under stress revealed character traits that normal training could never expose. He had watched Sarah process multiple variables quickly while maintaining concern for team safety over personal performance metrics. These qualities, Marcus noted, were exactly what SEAL instructors looked for when evaluating candidates for leadership positions within the teams. The stress inoculation exercises continued for 3 days, with scenarios becoming increasingly complex and pressure intensifying as participants grew more exhausted. Sleep deprivation became a constant factor, with participants receiving only 2 to 3 hours of rest per night. Sarah learned to function effectively while experiencing the mental fog that accompanied extreme fatigue. Jennifer struggled more than expected during the leadership exercises, despite her military background. She later confided to Sarah that the civilian environment made it harder for her to access the mental frameworks she had developed during Marine training. The absence of military structure and clear chain of command forced her to operate in ways that felt unfamiliar and uncomfortable. On the 4th day of stress testing, Marcus introduced an exercise that would become legendary among participants who survived the program. He announced that the group would attempt a challenge based on an actual Navy SEAL training event that had achieved almost mythical status among special operations communities. The challenge combined everything they had learned about physical endurance, mental resilience, and teamwork into a single test that lasted over 12 hours. The challenge began with a 2-hour ocean swim in rough seas, conducted in teams of 2 where partners had to maintain contact throughout the exercise. Sarah was paired with David Chen, a former Army Special Forces medic who had joined the program to test his fitness before applying for federal law enforcement positions. David possessed impressive technical swimming skills, but Sarah's months of cold water training gave her an advantage in the harsh conditions. Halfway through the swim, David began showing signs of hypothermia that concerned Sarah significantly. His stroke rate decreased and his speech became slurred when they paused to check their position relative to the beach. Sarah faced a decision that could determine both of their fates in the challenge. She could abandon David to save her own performance time, or she could sacrifice her individual results to ensure his safety. Sarah chose to support David through the remainder of the swim, using techniques she had learned for sharing body heat and maintaining morale when conditions became desperate. They finished the swimming portion well behind the leaders, but David recovered enough to continue with the land-based challenges that followed. Marcus observed this interaction with particular interest, taking notes that he would later share with Sarah. The land portion required teams to carry heavy loads across 20 miles of mountain terrain, navigating by compass and reaching specific checkpoints within strict time limits. Each team carried a simulated casualty that added weight and complexity to every movement. The psychological pressure came from knowing that missing any checkpoint would result in immediate elimination from the program. Sarah and David found their rhythm during the mountain phase, with Sarah's endurance training complementing David's navigation skills and tactical knowledge. They passed two teams that had led after the swimming portion, demonstrating that success in individual events did not guarantee overall performance when challenges became more complex and interdependent. The most difficult checkpoint required teams to cross a river using improvised rope systems while carrying their equipment and the simulated casualty. The water was dangerously cold and the current was strong enough to sweep away anyone who lost their footing. Sarah watched two teams ahead of them struggle with the crossing, with one participant requiring rescue by instructors when he became overwhelmed by the conditions. Sarah and David approached the river crossing methodically, taking extra time to secure their rope system and plan their movement sequence. David's military engineering background proved invaluable as he identified the safest crossing points and designed anchor systems that could support their weight plus equipment. Sarah's rock climbing experience helped her maintain control during the actual crossing when the rope became slippery and difficult to grip. They completed the river crossing without incident, but the time spent on safety measures had put them behind schedule for reaching the final checkpoint. The last 5 miles had to be covered at a pace that would test their ability to maintain performance standards while completely exhausted. Sarah felt her body beginning to shut down as they pushed through terrain that seemed designed to break human determination. The final challenge took place at an obstacle course that required individual and team performance on exercises that tested every skill they had developed during the program. Participants had to complete rope climbs, wall traversals, and endurance circuits while instructors created artificial emergencies that demanded immediate responses without breaking concentration on the primary tasks. Sarah approached the obstacle course with reserves of mental energy that surprised her given the physical exhaustion she felt throughout her body. She had discovered during the mountain phase that her mind could continue functioning clearly even when her muscles screamed for rest. This separation between mental and physical fatigue became her greatest asset as she moved through obstacles that had seemed impossible when she first attempted them weeks earlier. The rope climb portion proved to be Sarah's moment of triumph and revelation. The exercise required participants to climb a 50-foot rope using only their arms, a feat that demanded upper body strength that many participants lacked after 12 hours of continuous challenges. Sarah had spent months developing grip strength and climbing technique, but the real test was mental, maintaining technique and determination when failure meant dropping into cold water below. Sarah completed the rope climb faster than any participant in the group, including several former military personnel who possessed superior upper body strength. Her success came not from physical advantages, but from mental preparation techniques she had developed during months of training. Marcus later explained that her performance demonstrated the kind of mental resilience that separated successful SEAL candidates from those who possessed impressive physical gifts but lacked psychological toughness. As the challenge concluded, Sarah realized that she had not only survived every test, but had excelled in ways that challenged assumptions about physical limitations and mental barriers. The exhausted group of participants had been transformed through shared suffering into something resembling the brotherhood that Marcus had described when explaining SEAL team dynamics. Marcus gathered the survivors for a debrief session that would reveal individual performance metrics and provide insight into how their results compared to actual SEAL training standards. Sarah waited nervously for feedback that would determine whether her months of preparation had achieved the goals she had set for herself at the beginning of this journey. Marcus Thompson stood before the 5 remaining participants with a gravity that Sarah had never seen before. The man who had pushed them beyond their perceived limits for 3 weeks now seemed almost reverent as he prepared to share their performance results. He explained that what they were about to hear were not simply individual scores, but measurements against standards that had been established by some of the most elite warriors in human history. The first revelation shocked everyone, including Marcus himself. Sarah's combined performance across all measured events had not just met Navy SEAL training standards, she had exceeded them in several categories. Her time on the final endurance challenge had beaten the existing record by nearly 8 minutes, a margin that Marcus initially suspected was a timing error until he verified the results multiple times. Marcus shared specific numbers that brought the magnitude of Sarah's achievement into sharp focus. Her swimming times consistently ranked in the top 10% of recorded SEAL candidate performances. Her endurance scores during the mountain challenges exceeded the minimum requirements by margins that placed her among the most capable candidates Marcus had ever evaluated, military or civilian. But the numbers, Marcus explained, told only part of the story. The qualities that truly separated elite operators from exceptional athletes were harder to quantify but equally important to measure. Sarah's performance under stress, her decision-making when exhausted, and her willingness to sacrifice individual performance for team success demonstrated leadership characteristics that SEAL instructors specifically sought in potential candidates. Jennifer Walsh, who had completed the program despite struggling with some leadership exercises, was the first to voice what everyone was thinking. She told Sarah directly that she had just witnessed something unprecedented in her military experience, a civilian not only meeting elite special operations standards, but demonstrating the mental toughness that many trained military personnel never developed. David Chen, Sarah's partner during the final challenges, provided perspective that helped Sarah understand the broader implications of her achievement. As a former Special Forces medic, David had worked alongside Navy SEALs during joint operations and had observed their training methods firsthand. He told Sarah that her performance would have placed her among the top candidates in any actual SEAL training class. Marcus then shared information that transformed Sarah's personal achievement into something with potentially historic significance. He explained that several military leaders and policymakers had been quietly monitoring the results of his civilian training programs, looking for data that could inform decisions about expanding special operations opportunities for qualified women. The timing of Sarah's breakthrough performance coincided with ongoing debates within the Department of Defense about gender integration in combat roles. Military leaders were seeking concrete evidence that women could meet the same physical and mental standards as men without requiring modified training programs or adjusted performance criteria. Sarah's results provided exactly the kind of unambiguous data that policy discussions required. Marcus revealed that he had been documenting the training program extensively, with permission from all participants, as part of an informal study on civilian capabilities in military-style training environments. Sarah's performance metrics would be included in a report that Marcus planned to share with active duty SEAL instructors and military personnel officers who influenced policy decisions. The news that her private challenge might contribute to broader policy changes initially overwhelmed Sarah. She had begun this journey focused on personal goals and proving individual capabilities. The possibility that her efforts might help other women access opportunities that had been denied for decades added weight and meaning that she had not expected. 3 months after completing the training program, Sarah received a phone call that changed her life trajectory completely. Captain Rebecca Morrison, a Navy officer involved in gender integration planning, requested a meeting to discuss Sarah's training results and their potential implications for military policy. Captain Morrison had reviewed Marcus's documentation and wanted to understand Sarah's motivations and long-term goals. The meeting took place at a Navy facility in San Diego where Captain Morrison explained that the military was developing pilot programs to test gender integration in previously closed combat roles. These programs required candidates who could demonstrably meet existing standards without modifications or accommodations. Sarah's documented performance made her an ideal candidate for such testing. Captain Morrison offered Sarah an opportunity that seemed impossible just months earlier. The Navy was prepared to allow her to attempt actual SEAL training as part of a pilot program that would test whether qualified women could successfully complete the course without requiring changes to existing standards. Sarah would face the same challenges as male candidates, with the same instructors, using the same evaluation criteria. The offer came with significant caveats that Captain Morrison explained carefully. Sarah would be scrutinized intensely by media, military personnel, and political observers who had strong opinions about gender integration in combat roles. Her performance would be interpreted as evidence either supporting or opposing broader policy changes that affected thousands of other women in the military. Sarah requested time to consider the offer and discuss it with her family and mentors. The decision would require her to delay college plans, commit to years of military service, and accept responsibility for representing capabilities of all women rather than just demonstrating her own achievements. The personal challenge had evolved into something with implications far beyond individual goals. Marcus Thompson provided guidance that helped Sarah understand the magnitude of what she was considering. He explained that accepting the Navy's offer would make her a test case for one of the most significant military policy changes in decades. Success would open doors for other qualified women, but failure would likely delay similar opportunities for years or decades. The conversation with Marcus also revealed details about the reaction to Sarah's performance within the special operations community. Many active duty SEALs had reviewed her training results with skepticism that gradually transformed into respect as they examined the documentation more carefully. Some instructors requested additional information about her training methods and mental preparation techniques. Sarah's parents struggled with the decision more than she did. Her father understood the military implications and supported her goals, but her mother worried about the physical dangers and psychological pressure that would accompany such intense scrutiny. Family discussions continued for weeks as Sarah weighed the opportunity against the potential costs of failure or success. Jennifer Walsh, who had maintained contact with Sarah after completing the training program, provided perspective that ultimately influenced Sarah's decision. Jennifer explained that military culture changed slowly and typically required undeniable proof before accepting new approaches or policies. Sarah's documented performance provided the kind of evidence that could accelerate changes that might otherwise take decades to achieve. 6 months after shattering records that Navy SEALs had established, Sarah Martinez walked through the gates of Naval Special Warfare Training Facility as the first woman formally authorized to attempt the complete SEAL training program under the same standards applied to male candidates. The young woman who had started with a simple question about physical limitations was about to test whether determination could overcome institutional barriers that had existed for generations. The story that began with laughter and skepticism was entering a new chapter where the stakes extended far beyond individual achievement. Sarah carried with her not only the results of months of grueling preparation, but also the hopes and concerns of thousands of women who might follow in her footsteps. The real test was just beginning, and the entire military world was watching to see whether records were made to be broken by anyone with sufficient determination to shatter them.